She had 19 minutes to save her future, but the woman bleeding in the alley had maybe 4. Philadelphia. November 7th. Celeste Reyes was running through fog-covered streets like her life depended on it. Because it did. A nursing textbook was pressed against her chest as she sprinted toward the final exam that would decide everything. 1 minute late, and the doors would lock. Her scholarship would be gone, and 3 years of sacrifice, scrubbing floors, and working multiple jobs just to raise her 18-year-old sister alone would be erased. But then she heard it. A low, broken moan coming from a dark alley. An older woman lay crumpled on the concrete, her cashmere coat soaked through with blood. While the rest of the city stepped over the dying woman like she was nothing, Celeste reached a breaking point. She dropped to her knees, choosing a stranger's life over her own future. She had no idea that this single act of mercy would drag her into a shadow war. She didn't start or expose a conspiracy that had been destroying lives for years. Most importantly, she didn't know that the most dangerous man in Philadelphia already knew her name. If this story already has you holding your breath, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this. And subscribe now, because you really don't want to miss what's coming. Because when Cristiano Valenti finally stands in front of the girl who saved his mother, what he offers her won't be gratitude. It'll be something far more dangerous, and she'll have to decide if she's brave enough to take it. The ambulance had just pulled away, and Celeste was running. She ran like she had never run before, her worn shoes slapping against the wet pavement, her lungs burning in the cold air, her hands still sticky with the dried blood of the woman she had just saved. The Temple University nursing building rose ahead of her, gray and heavy beneath the November sky. She took the stairs 2 at a time, her shoes squealing against the polished stone floor, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Room 412. The door was closed. Through the small glass pane, she saw her classmates bent over their exams, pencils moving in silence, as if the world outside didn't exist. Her seat, 3rd row, left side, was empty. She knocked, softly at first, then harder. A middle-aged man opened the door. Mr. Davis, the exam proctor. His eyes moved over her from head to toe, pausing on the blood on her shirt, on her hands, on her wrists, then quickly looking away. Ms. Reyes, the exam started at 7. I know, I'm sorry. There was a woman who was attacked and I had to. Mr. Davis raised a hand, cutting her off. Dean Holloway's policy. No exceptions for late entry. I can't let you in. But I'm sorry, he added, his voice lower now, as if he didn't agree but didn't dare do otherwise. You should speak directly with Dean Holloway. Her office is on the 2nd floor. The door closed in her face. Through the glass, one of her classmates glanced up, saw Celeste standing outside, then returned to her exam as if she'd seen nothing. Celeste went down to the 2nd floor. Each step felt heavier than the last. The hallway was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. Dean Holloway's office sat at the end of the corridor, a heavy wooden door with a polished brass plaque. She knocked. Come in. Patricia Holloway sat behind an oak desk, platinum blonde hair clipped neatly in place, pale blue eyes as cold as the winter light outside the window. She watched Celeste walk in, took in the blood on her clothes, on her hands, and her expression didn't change at all. No surprise, no concern, nothing. Ms. Reyes. The exam began at 7. Celeste swallowed. I know. I'm sorry. A woman was stabbed in an alley on my way to campus. She was bleeding from her neck. I'm a nursing student. I couldn't walk away. Holloway didn't blink. The door closes at 7. That's policy. No exceptions. But she would have died if I hadn't stopped. No one forced you to stop, Ms. Reyes. Your responsibility this morning was to be in the exam room at 7. You failed to do that. The words struck Celeste like a slap. Please. This exam determines my scholarship. If I don't pass this course, I'll lose everything. I have a younger sister who needs me. Holloway glanced at the watch on her wrist. The kind of watch Celeste wouldn't be able to afford even if she worked her entire life. Then perhaps you should have considered that before deciding to play the hero. This school doesn't lower standards for emotional decisions. Absent. 0. That's the outcome. She checked a paper on her desk, as if Celeste were no longer standing there. You'll receive the official email today. Celeste stood there, her hands clenched at her sides, her nails digging into her palms where dried blood still clung in the creases of her skin. She wanted to say something else, wanted to scream. wanted to slam her hand on the desk, but she was Celeste Reyes. She never made noise. She never demanded. She only endured. She turned and walked out. The wooden door clicked shut behind her. A soft sound. The kind of silence that could kill a dream. She stood in the hallway until the bell signaling the end of the exam rang. Students poured out, laughing, relieved. They saw her, saw the blood on her clothes, then quickly looked away. Some whispered, some laughed quietly. Jennifer Whitmore, the daughter of a real estate investor, stopped in front of her. "Oh my God, you really skipped the exam to save some random stranger on the street?" Her voice was sweet in the way only carefully packaged cruelty could be. So brave. Celeste didn't answer. She walked straight into the bathroom at the end of the hall, shut the door, locked it. She turned on the faucet and began to scrub. The blood had dried beneath her nails, in the folds of her palms, in the lines people said revealed your future. She scrubbed until her skin turned red, until the water ran clear, until there was no trace left to prove that this morning she had saved a life. Cold water streamed over her fingers, and in the mirror, she saw a girl she barely recognized, hollow-eyed, hair tangled, clothes stained with blood, looking like someone who had just lost something she'd never get back. She turned off the tap, stood there, silent. Then she felt her phone vibrate in her pocket. A new email. Celeste opened the email right there in the bathroom, her fingers still damp, still red from scrubbing too hard. The subject line appeared in all capital letters like a sentence handed down by a judge. Urgent notice, scholarship status, action required. She tapped it open. Dear Ms. Reyes, due to your absence from the mandatory final examination, your academic status has been moved to suspension. Your full scholarship is currently under review for withdrawal. In order to continue in the nursing program, you will be required to pay $34,000 in tuition before the end of the semester, should the scholarship be officially revoked. In addition, you are required to attend a disciplinary hearing on November 20th. The outcome of this hearing will determine your academic future at the university. Sincerely, Dean Patricia Holloway. $34,000. Celeste read it again, then again, then again. Each time, the number stayed there, unchanged, not smaller, not fading away. 34,000. She opened her banking app. Her balance appeared, $47.23. That was everything. Everything she had in the world after 3 years of working herself to exhaustion, after thousands of hours mopping floors, pouring drinks, and bathing elderly people who couldn't remember her name. $47. She didn't even have enough money to buy food for the entire week, and they wanted $34,000 from her. She slipped the phone back into her pocket, left the bathroom, went down the stairs, and out of the building. She didn't remember how long she walked, or how many streets she crossed. She only knew that when she finally realized where she was standing in front of the door to her studio apartment in South Philadelphia, 5th floor. At the end of the hallway, where the paint peeled from the walls and the corridor light flickered like it was about to die, she unlocked the door. Maya was sitting at the kitchen table, a table so small it barely fit 2 people, doing her homework. 18 years old, black hair tied in a ponytail, eyes so much like their mother's that sometimes looking at her made Celeste want to cry. Maya looked up, frowned. "You're home early. Are you done with your exam already? Why are your clothes so dirty?" Celeste had practiced lying her entire life, not because she wanted to, but because the truth was too heavy to place on the shoulders of an 18-year-old who needed to believe everything would be okay. "I took it. It went fine. I slipped on the way home. That's all. Have you eaten?" Maya studied her for another second. The look of a child who had grown up too fast, who knew when her sister was hiding something but also knew better than to ask. "I ate already. There are a few slices of bread left in the fridge." Celeste nodded, went into the bathroom to change, tossed the blood-stained clothes into a corner. She pulled on an old t-shirt and frayed sleep pants, then sat down on the floor between the bedroom and the kitchen, because the apartment was so small they were almost the same space. Her back rested against the bed frame, knees drawn to her chest. She started calculating. $34,000. Dormitory cleaning job, $12 an hour, 20 hours a week. Bar job, $15 an hour plus tips. Some nights good, some nights not. Elder care work, $13 an hour, weekends only. Rent, $950 a month, 2 months behind. Electricity bill, overdue. Health insurance for Maya, hospital bills still being paid off since their mother died. Food, bus fare, books. She calculated again and again, twisted the numbers every possible way, cut everything that could be cut, and every time, the result was the same: impossible, never enough. Not in one lifetime, let alone before the end of the semester. Maya turned on soft music at the kitchen table, someone's voice drifting through the thin walls, and Celeste sat there in the darkness, slowly filling the room as the sun set, without bothering to turn on the light. She thought of their mother, of the promise she made at the hospital bed. "I promise you, I'll take care of Maya. I won't let her live like we did." And she had kept that promise. Every day, every sleepless night, every meal she gave up so her sister could eat, every time she wanted to quit but didn't. 3 years. And now, everything was about to disappear because of 19 minutes, because she didn't walk past a dying woman. The darkness in the room thickened. Celeste looked toward the window. 5th floor. Below it, a narrow alley, trash bins, concrete. The thought came uninvited, gentle as a cold draft slipping through a crack in the door. It would be quick. It wouldn't hurt. Maya would get the insurance money. She immediately felt sick, not because the thought was wrong, but because it came so easily, so naturally, as if it had been waiting there all along, just waiting for the exact moment she was weakest to step forward. Then Maya laughed in the other room. A small laugh, soft, ordinary, the kind of laugh you make when you read something funny on your phone. And that sound pulled Celeste back. Maya had no one but her. If she disappeared, Maya would become an orphan whose sister had promised to protect her and then walked away. Just like the system had abandoned their mother, just like the world had abandoned their father. Celeste clenched her hands, nails digging into her palms where the skin still burned from scrubbing. She took a deep breath, then another, then another. She didn't stand up. Not yet. She just sat there in the darkness, listening to her sister breathe in the next room, reminding herself that she was still alive because someone needed her to stay alive. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay staring at the ceiling, listening to Maya's steady breathing on the folding bed less than a meter away, thinking about that morning, about the woman in the alley, about the eyes that had looked at her with gratitude she wasn't sure she deserved. She had saved a life, and the price was everything she had. She didn't know that somewhere out there, in the darkness of the city, someone was looking for her. And that person wasn't the kind of person you want to meet after midnight. The next day, Celeste still went to work. Not because she wanted to, but because the rent bill didn't care whether she was falling apart or not. The dormitory cleaning shift started at 9 in the evening, when the students were back in their rooms and the hallways grew empty, filled only with the hum of fluorescent lights and the smell of cheap floor cleaner. Celeste pushed her cart down the 3rd floor corridor, wiping down each shared bathroom, scrubbing every sink, picking up every paper towel students tossed onto the floor less than a step away from the trash can. Most of the students here didn't know her name. To them, she was just a shadow in a blue uniform pushing a mop cart every night, someone they passed without looking, as if she were part of the wall itself. And tonight, she was grateful for that. She didn't want anyone to see her. She didn't want anyone to ask if she was okay, because if someone did, she was afraid she wouldn't be able to hold it together. She was mopping the 4th floor restroom when she heard the familiar sound of wheels, another cleaning cart rolling slowly across the tiles. Then a voice followed, gentle and careful, the way you speak to a wounded animal when you don't want to scare it. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" Beatrice Jackson stood in the doorway, still holding her mop, 68 years old, gray hair pinned neatly beneath a cloth scarf, hands rough from 35 years of cleaning these buildings. Most students didn't know her name. Most faculty didn't either. She was just the old woman with a mop who appeared after everyone had gone home and disappeared before they came back. But B. Jackson saw everything. 35 years in these buildings, she had seen children arrive with bright eyes and leave with them extinguished. She had seen doors close in the faces of people who had no one to open them, and she had seen Celeste the morning before, running down the hallway with blood on her clothes and desperation in her eyes. Celeste tried to smile, failed. "I'm fine, Ms. B." B set her mop aside and stepped closer, looking at Celeste with eyes that had seen too many lies to be fooled by another one. She didn't say anything. She just walked to the single-stall bathroom at the end of the hall, the one no one used because it was too far and the light always flickered. She opened the door and looked back at Celeste. "Come in here, sweetheart." Celeste didn't know why she followed. Maybe because she had sat alone in the dark too long the night before. Maybe because Bee's voice sounded like her mother's on nights she couldn't sleep. Gentle, steady, safe, Bee locked the door and turned back to her. "Sit down, honey." Celeste sat on the closed toilet lid. Bee leaned against the sink, folded her arms, and stayed quiet for a moment, as if choosing each word carefully. Then she spoke. "I saw you yesterday morning. The blood, your eyes, and I heard what happened." Celeste opened her mouth, but Bee lifted a hand. "Don't tell me you're fine. Don't tell me what you tell everyone else. I'm not everyone else." Celeste's throat tightened, and then it came out, not because she wanted it to, but because it spilled over like a dam breaking. "I saved a woman yesterday. I kept her alive until the ambulance came, and now I'm about to lose everything because of it." Bee nodded slowly, as if Celeste had just confirmed something she already knew. "I know." Then she added, her voice lower, heavier, "And you're not the first." Celeste looked up. "I've been cleaning this place for 35 years. I see everything. I see kids like you come through here. Kids who work themselves to the bone, who wear the same 2 outfits over and over, who eat 1 meal a day and still try to get the highest grades in the class. And I see them disappear." Bee paused, her eyes darkening, one after another. An assignment turned in a day late. One absence, a few minutes late. There's always a reason, and it's always kids like you, the ones with no one standing behind them. Celeste's mouth went dry. "I thought it was just me." Bee looked at her, her gaze both gentle and firm. "It's never just you, sweetheart. People like Dean Holloway protect their world by pushing people like us out. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked." Silence. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Then Bee spoke again, her tone shifting, softer but more careful, like someone setting something fragile on a table. "But listen to me now. Sometimes good people suffer first. They're tested in the cruelest ways, but that suffering doesn't break them. It shows the world what they're made of. You don't feel strong right now. I know, but you're stronger than you think." Tears burned in Celeste's eyes. Bee stepped closer and gently lifted her chin with fingers that were rough but warm. "And there's one more thing. The woman you saved yesterday, Valenti. Does that name mean anything to you?" Celeste shook her head. Bee studied her for a long moment, weighing how much to say. Then she spoke. "I've worked long enough to hear names ordinary people shouldn't hear. Valenti is one of them. They'll come looking for you, sweetheart. Not because you did something wrong, but because you did the right thing. And when they do," Bee looked straight into Celeste's eyes. "Don't be afraid." That was all Bee said. She unlocked the door, picked up her mop, and stepped back into the hallway as if the conversation had never happened. Celeste sat there a little longer in the dark, unused bathroom at the end of the hall. Her heart pounded. "Valenti." She whispered the name into the silence, not understanding why it made the air feel heavier. Before she could understand, night had already settled over the city outside the window, and somewhere out there, someone was coming. Celeste got back to the apartment close to 11 at night. Her cleaning shift ended at 10:30, but she walked home instead of taking the bus because $1.75 was now something she couldn't afford to spend unless it was absolutely necessary. Maya was already asleep, curled up on the folding bed, the blanket pulled up to her chin because the heater in this apartment never really worked. Celeste locked the door, checked the safety chain, and changed her clothes in the dark so she wouldn't wake her sister. Then she sat at the kitchen table, opened her notebook, and began writing down the numbers she had been calculating in her head all day. Even though she knew the result wouldn't change, she was only on the 3rd line when she heard it. A knock at the door. Not loud, not rushed, but firm, confident. The kind of knock made by someone who knew the door would open and didn't need to hurry. 3 knocks, evenly spaced. Then silence. 11:47 at night. No one knocked on an apartment door in South Philadelphia at that hour carrying good news. Celeste stood, moving carefully so she wouldn't wake Maya. She walked to the door and looked through the peephole, and she stopped breathing. A man stood in the hallway beneath the flickering light, as if the darkness itself had stretched back to make room for him. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a black 3-piece suit tailored so perfectly it looked out of place against the peeling paint and cracked tile of this building. Dark hair cut neat and short, a square jaw, and his eyes. When Celeste looked through the peephole and met those eyes, she understood immediately why Bia had told her not to be afraid. because the first instinct when you looked into eyes that cold and steel gray was fear. Behind him, a step back, stood another man, larger, expressionless, arms folded across his chest, motionless like a guard statue. Celeste opened the door with the safety chain still on, just enough to leave a narrow gap. "Yes, Celeste Reyes." His voice was low, not a question, a statement, as if he already knew the answer before speaking and was giving her the courtesy of confirming it. "Who are you?" "Cristiano Valenti. You saved my mother's life yesterday." Valenti. The name B had spoken. The name Celeste had whispered in the dark bathroom at the end of the hallway less than 2 hours earlier. And now it was standing at her door, wearing a suit that cost more than her yearly rent, close to midnight. Her heart beat faster, but her voice stayed steady. "Is she all right?" "She's alive." "Because of you?" Silence. He looked through the narrow opening, and Celeste knew what he was seeing. The peeling walls, the dim yellow kitchen light, the small table with the open notebook. The damp smell she had grown so used to, she no longer noticed it. Those gray eyes swept over everything in less than 2 seconds, quick and precise, like someone accustomed to assessing everything at a glance. Then he looked back at her. "I want to talk to you. It's almost midnight, I know." And that was when small footsteps sounded behind her. "Celeste." "Who is it?" Maya stood in the middle of the room, hair messy, eyes heavy with sleep, wrapped in the old jacket she used as a nightshirt because it was thicker than any blanket they owned. 18 years old, thin, small, and completely unaware of who was standing on the other side of the door. Cristiano looked at Maya, and what happened next was something Celeste didn't expect. His expression changed. Not much. Not obviously, but enough for her to notice. Those steel eyes softened for half a second. Something flickering there. Maybe a memory. Maybe understanding. Maybe the image of another child he had once been long ago, before the world turned him into something the world feared. Then it was gone, as quickly as it came. "Your sister." Celeste stepped sideways, blocking the view between Maya and the narrow opening. "She's not involved," she said quietly, firmly, and she saw the corner of his mouth lift. Not a smile, just the ghost of one, as if her reaction showed him something he didn't often see. "Everything about the person who saved my mother's life concerns me, Ms. Reyes." He said it slowly, evenly, not a threat but not a request either. It was a fact, delivered in the voice of a man accustomed to being obeyed. But he didn't step inside, didn't try to push the door, didn't apply pressure. He just stood there, in the shabby hallway of one of the cheapest buildings in South Philadelphia, wearing the most expensive suit Celeste had ever seen outside a magazine, and said, "10 minutes, the corner cafe, I'll wait." Then he turned away. No glance back, no pause for her answer. His footsteps on the hallway floor made no sound, like someone used to moving through darkness without leaving a trace. The larger man behind him, Tommaso, looked at Celeste for another second, gave a slight nod, then followed. The footsteps faded. The elevator doors opened, then silence. Maya stepped closer, peering through the still open gap. "Who was that, Celeste?" Celeste stood there, one hand still gripping the safety chain, her heart pounding in her chest like it wanted to break free. B's words echoed in her mind. "They'll come looking for you. Don't be afraid." She looked at Maya. "No one. Go back to sleep." She closed the door, locked it. Then she looked down at her hands. They were shaking. She stood still for a minute, then another. Then she grabbed her coat, the thinnest one she owned, the only one that didn't have blood on it. "I'm stepping out for a bit. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone." Maya looked at her with eyes too old for 18, but she nodded and didn't ask anything else. Celeste stepped into the hallway, pulled the door shut behind her, and headed for the stairs. Outside, the November night cut through her skin. The corner cafe was less than a minute away, warm yellow light spilling onto the wet sidewalk, and through the glass she saw him already seated in the back corner, his back against the wall, face toward the door, the exact position of someone who never let anyone stand behind him. A black Maybach was parked across the street, Tommaso standing beside it, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning every passing car. Celeste took a deep breath, then she pushed open the cafe door and stepped inside. The cafe was almost empty. An old man sat at the counter, hunched over a cup of cold coffee. An older waitress stood behind the bar wiping glasses, and when Celeste walked in, the woman glanced toward the back corner and quickly looked down again, the kind of lowered gaze that comes from knowing you shouldn't stare too long. Celeste walked straight to the corner table. Cristiano sat there with his back against the wall, an espresso in front of him, even though it was nearly midnight, his hands resting on the table, calm, as if he were in his own living room, instead of a cheap cafe with peeling tiles and flickering neon lights. She sat down across from him, without waiting to be invited. "You're not having anything to drink. I'm not here to drink coffee." He tilted his head slightly, studying her with gray eyes that looked like smoke under the cafe's yellow light, and something like curiosity crossed his face, the curiosity of someone who didn't often encounter surprises. "You're not afraid of me." It wasn't a question. It was an observation. Celeste met his gaze. "Should I be?" "Most people are. Most people haven't just lost everything they had to save a stranger. When you're already at the bottom, there's nothing left to be afraid of." He said nothing for several seconds. He just watched her, and Celeste had the strange feeling that she was being read layer by layer, as if he were turning the pages of her life and reading every line without her saying a word. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his vest, pulled out a business card, placed it on the table, and slid it toward her. Celeste looked down. Miranda, Ashford, attorney, Ashford and Associates, an address in Center City, a part of town Celeste only ever passed through on the bus and had never had a reason to enter. "My lawyer. She'll contact you about the hearing." Celeste looked up. "I don't need a lawyer. I don't need your help. You lost your scholarship," he said evenly, without emphasis or emotion, like he was reading from a report. "It's under official review for revocation. You owe $34,000. You have a disciplinary hearing on the 20th. Your bank account holds $47.23. You're 2 months behind on rent, and you're supporting an 18-year-old sister on 3 minimum wage jobs." Each word struck Celeste like a stone, not because they were wrong, but because they were exact, and because a stranger sitting across from her knew her life better than anyone she had ever met. "You know? How do you know all of this?" "I know everything about the person who saved my mother's life, Celeste." It was the first time he said her name, not Ms. Reyes, just Celeste, and the way he said it, slow and deliberate, as if he were lifting it into the light and examining it, made her feel both seen and completely exposed, including, he continued, his voice dropping slightly, "Your father's death 19 years ago. Miguel Reyes." Celeste went rigid. The blood in her veins turned cold. He watched her, and for the first time beyond the steel in his eyes, she saw something else. Not quite sympathy, not yet, but recognition. The silent nod of someone who recognized a familiar wound. "The robbery," he said, "where nothing was taken." Silence. The cafe seemed to shrink. Sound fell away. Only those 6 words hung between them. "What are you saying?" Celeste heard her own voice tremble and hated it. "I'm saying I know more than you think, and Miranda will explain the rest when you're ready to listen." He pushed the card closer. Celeste looked at it, then at him. Then she stood. "I didn't save your mother to get anything in return. I don't want your money. I don't want your lawyer. And I don't want to owe anyone, especially someone I don't know." He didn't look surprised. He didn't look disappointed. He looked nothing but calm. The calm of someone who had heard hundreds of people say no, and knew it was rarely the final answer. He stood slowly, and when he straightened, he was a full head taller than her, his shadow falling across the table, across the business card, across her. "My mother is alive because of you." His voice was low and steady, but beneath the calm was something heavy, something that couldn't be negotiated. "In my world, every debt is paid. No exceptions, no refusals, no forgetting." Then he did something Celeste couldn't react to in time. He picked up the card, stepped closer, close enough for her to smell sandalwood and expensive tobacco, close enough to feel the heat of his body through the fabric of his suit, and gently slipped the card into the pocket of her coat, his fingers brushing her shoulder through the thin fabric, quick and precise, but heavy enough for her to feel the weight of that hand, a hand she was certain had done things she didn't want to know about. "Call Miranda, or I'll call you." He walked past her toward the door. He didn't look back. The Maybach's engine turned over. Tommaso opened the door. Streetlight flashed across his face for a brief moment before he disappeared into the car, and in that instant, Celeste saw a faint scar running from his temple down his left cheek, a line the darkness had hidden until the very last second. The car pulled away. The red taillights faded into the mist. Then there was nothing left but the empty street and the cafe's air conditioner humming. Celeste stood there, her hand unconsciously touching the pocket of her coat where the business card lay warm against her chest. She went home. Maya was still asleep. She locked the door, sat at the kitchen table, opened the old laptop she had bought secondhand for $30, and typed 2 words into the search bar. Cristiano Valenti. The results appeared. Dozens of articles. Valenti Enterprises CEO opens new casino in Atlantic City. The Valenti family donates $5 million to Philadelphia Children's Hospital. Cristiano Valenti, the East Coast's most enigmatic billionaire. She scrolled. And other articles began to appear, the kind written in careful language by major outlets to avoid lawsuits. FBI investigates alleged ties between Valenti Enterprises and organized crime. Insufficient evidence to indict. The murder of Mario Valenti 14 years ago remains unsolved. Cristiano Valenti, heir to an empire or kingpin of the underworld. Celeste's hands shook on the keyboard. She had saved this man's mother, and now this man knew her name, her address, everything about her life, and wanted to repay a debt she had never asked for. She closed the laptop and sat in the dark. Then her phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. No name. Just one line. You should forget about last night. It wasn't from Cristiano. She knew that in her bones. This message came from somewhere else. From the other side of a war she didn't yet realize she had stepped into. Celeste stared at the screen until it went dark. Then she looked at the business card in the pocket of the coat hanging on the hook by the door. Miranda Ashford, attorney. Bea had said not to be afraid when they came, but no one had said anything about the others. The ones who didn't knock, didn't wait in cafes, didn't leave names. That night, Celeste didn't sleep, but this time, it wasn't from despair. For the first time in 2 days, she felt something else alongside fear. Something more dangerous than fear. Curiosity. 3 days passed before Celeste called Miranda Ashford. 3 days of going to work, coming home, cooking for Maya, pretending everything was normal while her world cracked apart piece by piece. 3 days of staring at the business card on the kitchen table, picking it up, setting it down, picking it up again. 3 days of thinking about the anonymous message, about the 6 words Cristiano had spoken in the cafe, about the robbery where nothing was taken. And each time she thought about it, the ground beneath her felt a little less solid. On the 4th day, she called. Not because she trusted Cristiano Valenti, but because she couldn't stop thinking about her father. Miranda Ashford answered on the 2nd ring, her voice sharp and professional. Not a word wasted. Ms. Reyes, I've been expecting this call. 2 in the afternoon, my office. The address is on the card. Then she hung up before Celeste could say anything else. Ashford and Associates occupied the 23rd floor of a glass tower in Center City, the part of Philadelphia Celeste only knew from bus windows, where every step on the sidewalk sounded like money, where people wore clothes she wouldn't dare touch in a store. She stood in the lobby wearing the cleanest coat she owned, jeans without holes, sneakers scrubbed white, feeling like an ink stain on blank paper. She stepped into the elevator. 23rd floor. The doors opened onto a hallway lined with thick carpet, walls hung with art, the smell of oak and leather in the air. The receptionist smiled politely, the kind of smile you're paid to give, and led her into a glass-walled conference room overlooking the city. Philadelphia spread out below like a map. And from up here, South Philadelphia was just a small gray patch in the distance, where her 5th-floor apartment wasn't even large enough to be seen. Miranda Ashford stood beside the table with her back to the window. 45 years old, red hair cut to her shoulders, green eyes sharp as a scalpel, a deep red suit tailored to perfection. Heels Celeste guessed cost 2 months of rent. Miranda turned as Celeste entered, and the look she gave her wasn't pity, wasn't curiosity, but assessment, quick and precise, the same way Cristiano had looked at her in the cafe, only colder, more professional, with nothing personal in it. Sit down, Ms. Reyes. We have a lot to discuss. Celeste sat. Miranda opened a thick leather-bound file with a clasp and slid it across the table toward her. Patricia Holloway, 52 years old, Dean of the School of Nursing at Temple University for 15 years. Celeste looked at the file but didn't open it. Miranda did. Inside were dozens of pages, charts, photographs, email copies, student records, financial reports. Over the past 5 years, Miranda said, her voice steady like someone reading an indictment in court, Dean Holloway has removed 23 scholarship students from the nursing program, all from low-income families, all dismissed for what she labeled administrative reasons. An assignment submitted 1 day late, a single absence, failure to meet a cultural fit standard no one can clearly define. 23 students. Celeste thought of B's words. I've seen kids like you disappear, and now she understood they hadn't disappeared. They had been pushed out. Miranda turned the next page. This is where it gets interesting. During the same period, 23 other students were admitted into the program despite having significantly lower academic scores than those who were dismissed, all from wealthy families. And 7 of them, Miranda tapped the page lightly with her finger, have direct or indirect ties to the Caruso family. Celeste stared at the name. Caruso. She had never heard it before, but the way Miranda said it, deliberate and careful, like someone holding a grenade with the pin already pulled, told her it wasn't an ordinary name. Who are the Carusos? Miranda studied her for a moment, weighing how much to reveal. Then she flipped to the final section of the file. These are copies of bank transfers from an anonymous account into Dean Holloway's personal accounts. Celeste looked down. Numbers jumped out at her. 5,000 here, 12,000 there, 20,000, 30,000. Regular deposits every few months for 10 years. Total, Miranda said before Celeste could ask. Over $400,000. Celeste stared at the number. 400,000. More than 10 times the amount the school demanded she pay to continue her education. Money she wouldn't earn in 10 years working 3 jobs at once. And Dean Holloway had taken it to do one thing: remove students like her and clear the path for others. Dean Holloway isn't just unfair, Ms. Reyes. Miranda closed the file and looked straight into Celeste's eyes. She's corrupt, systematically, and she has someone backing her. And that person isn't someone you want to meet. Celeste swallowed. Her throat felt dry and tight. You're saying Dean Holloway took money from the Carusos to expel scholarship students. I'm saying, Miranda leaned forward, that you weren't failed because you were 19 minutes late. You were failed because someone wanted you gone, and Dean Holloway was the instrument. The room fell silent. Philadelphia stretched beyond the glass, vast and indifferent, and Celeste sat there on the 23rd floor looking down at the city and realizing for the first time that what had happened to her wasn't bad luck, wasn't rigid policy, wasn't the natural consequence of being late. It was a conspiracy, and she had only seen half of it. Miranda glanced at her watch. I know you're overwhelmed, but there's more you need to hear. And the next part, she paused, her voice softening for the first time, concerns your father. Celeste said nothing. She just sat there with her hands resting on the glass table, looking at Miranda and waiting, because she knew from the way Miranda paused, from the way her voice softened by half a tone for the first time since the meeting began, that what was coming next would be worse than everything she had already heard. And she was right. Miranda opened a second file, thinner than the first, but older, its cover worn at the corners as if it had been kept in a drawer for a very long time, and she placed it in front of Celeste without opening it. Miguel Reyes. She said her father's name, and hearing someone else say it, pronouncing it the way her mother used to in Spanish, in a conference room on the 23rd floor of a building her father would never have been able to enter, made something inside Celeste's chest crack softly, like a fracture in glass you don't see until it spreads across the surface. Your father, Ms. Reyes, 19 years ago, worked the night shift at a warehouse in South Philadelphia, along the Delaware waterfront. Do you know that area? Celeste nodded. She knew it. The old warehouses by the river where her mother used to say her father went to work every night and came home before dawn, exhausted but smiling, always kissing both girls before she woke up. She remembered only fragments because she was 8 years old, but she remembered the smell of machine oil on his clothes, his rough but gentle hands brushing her hair, his voice singing in Spanish while he rocked Maya to sleep. That warehouse, Miranda continued, belonged to a shipping company. On paper, it operated in logistics. In reality, it was one of several fronts for the Caruso family. The room seemed to begin to turn slowly around Celeste. Her father didn't know. He was just a dock worker on the night shift, paid in cash, asking no questions because immigrants didn't have many choices, and he needed money to raise 2 small daughters. Until one night, Miranda opened the file. Inside were copies of police reports. Old, the paper yellowed, the ink faded, and beside them, a newer set of documents marked with the Valenti Enterprises logo. On March 12th, 19 years ago, your father's shift ended at 4 in the morning, but that night he left later than usual, and on his way out, he took a wrong turn, passing through a restricted area behind the warehouse where regular workers had no reason to be. Miranda turned the page. Based on what we have gathered, your father witnessed a shipment no one wanted him to see. She didn't specify what it was, and Celeste didn't ask, because she didn't need details to understand. Her father saw something he shouldn't have seen, and in the world the Carusos operated, that was a death sentence. 1 week later, your father was dead, Miranda said evenly, but slower, more careful, like a doctor delivering bad news she had given many times but never grew used to. Police recorded it as a home invasion and robbery, but nothing was taken. No television, no jewelry, no cash. Just a 32-year-old man, dead on his living room floor with 3 gunshot wounds, in front of his wife, while his 8-year-old daughter hid in a closet. Celeste heard her own breathing, fast and shallow, as if her lungs had forgotten how to work. She looked down at her hands on the glass table. They were shaking. Not the kind of shaking from cold or fear, but the kind that comes when the foundation of the world you thought you knew is suddenly pulled away. 19 years. 19 years believing her father died because of bad luck, because of a rough neighborhood, because he forgot to lock a door, because he was poor in a big city, and that was the price. 19 years of her mother living with a fear she never explained, moving constantly, glancing over her shoulder on the street, telling her daughters never to talk to strangers, until cancer took her before she could tell the truth. 19 years of Celeste carrying the memory of gunshots, her mother screaming, the darkness of the closet, the smell of gunpowder, and the silence afterward, the heaviest silence she had ever known. And all of it was a lie. Her father didn't die in a robbery. He was murdered, silenced, erased like an accounting error. Miranda stayed quiet, letting Celeste process it, because she had done this work long enough to know there were moments when words only made things worse. Then Celeste spoke, and her voice sounded like someone else's, distant and hollow, like a voice rising from the bottom of a well. But what does that have to do with me? With now? With Dean Holloway? Miranda looked at her, and in those sharp green eyes Celeste saw something for the first time. Not pity, but something closer to respect, the kind given to someone receiving the most devastating news of their life and still clear-minded enough to ask the right question. Anthony Caruso, Miranda said slowly, the boss of the Caruso family, the man who ordered your father's death, and the same man who has been backing Dean Holloway for the past 10 years. The room seemed to shrink, the glass walls closing in, the ceiling lowering. You're saying Caruso, the man who killed my father, is also the one paying Dean Holloway. I'm saying... Miranda leaned forward, her voice dropping as if sharing a secret the walls themselves shouldn't hear. That Caruso knows who you are. He knows you are Miguel Reyes's daughter. And 2 days ago, you saved the life of his greatest enemy, Gianna Valenti, the mother of Cristiano Valenti, the man Caruso has been trying to destroy for 14 years since ordering the assassination of Mario Valenti, Cristiano's father. Silence stretched long and heavy. Philadelphia outside the glass suddenly looked like a different city, darker, more dangerous, filled with shadows Celeste had never known existed. You think you were failed because you were 19 minutes late, Miranda said softly, each word sharp as a blade. No. Dean Holloway received instructions. Caruso wanted you gone, out of the school, out of sight, out of any place where you could become a threat. The daughter of Miguel Reyes saving the life of Cristiano Valenti's mother. Do you understand how dangerous that is in their world? Celeste did understand. In her bones, in her blood, in the memory of gunshots 19 years ago. She had never been able to forget. She stood, not because she wanted to leave, but because her legs wouldn't let her stay seated. She walked to the window and looked down at the city, at South Philadelphia in the far corner where her father died, her mother died, and she grew up believing life was unfair but at least random. Now she knew it wasn't random. It never had been. Miranda spoke from behind her. I know you're in shock, but you need to understand one thing. You are not an outsider anymore. You've been in this war since the night your father died. You just didn't know it, and now both sides know who you are. Celeste looked at her reflection in the glass. A 27-year-old woman, thin and exhausted, hollow-eyed, standing in the office of a Mafia boss's lawyer, having just learned her father was murdered by another Mafia boss and that her entire life had been a chain of consequences from a war she never knew existed. She turned back to Miranda. "So what does Cristiano Valenti want from me?" Miranda gathered the files with neat, precise movements, as if the conversation had not just shattered someone's understanding of the world. "He wants to repay a debt, and he wants to protect you, because right now you are the only person both Valenti and Caruso are watching." Miranda stood and buttoned her jacket. "And if I were you, I would let him, because Caruso is not the kind of man who knocks and waits in cafes." Celeste thought of the anonymous message. "You should forget about last night." And she understood that Miranda was right. Celeste stepped out of the glass tower, and the afternoon sunlight hit her eyes like a slap. She stood on the sidewalk as pedestrians streamed past on both sides, and she felt as if she were standing still in a moving world she no longer belonged to. Everything looked exactly the same as it had 2 hours earlier. The same buildings, the same cars, the same gray November sky over Philadelphia, yet nothing felt the same anymore. It felt as if someone had peeled a layer of paint off the picture she had been looking at for 27 years, and beneath that layer was a completely different image, darker, more frightening, and more real. Then she saw the car. The black Maybach was parked directly in front of the building, gleaming under streetlights that had just come on, looking like something from another world mistakenly dropped into hers. Tommaso stood beside it with his hands in his pockets, his face expressionless, but his eyes were not on her. They were fixed across the street, where a man in a black leather jacket stood smoking beneath a storefront awning, his gaze never leaving the building Celeste had just exited. That man was not looking at Tommaso, but Tommaso saw him, and Celeste saw him too. She did not know who he was, but she knew he was not standing there for a cigarette. "Get in." The voice came from the already open rear door, not Tommaso's but Cristiano's. Celeste looked at the man across the street, then at the Maybach. 2 weeks ago she would have kept walking to the bus stop like she always did, but 2 weeks ago she did not know what she knew now. She got into the car, the door closed, and the outside world disappeared. Inside the Maybach it was so quiet she could hear the leather seat creak as she sat down. The smell of leather, wood, and an expensive cologne. She did not know the name of filling the space. Cristiano sat across from her with one leg crossed, a folder open on his lap that he closed when she entered. He looked at her, and this time, she looked back. She met those gray eyes and made no effort to hide anything. Shock, anger, fear, all of it was there on her face, in her eyes, and she did not bother to cover it because she was too tired to perform. "You knew from the beginning," she said, not as a question. The car began to move. Philadelphia slid past beyond the tinted windows. Buildings, bare trees, pedestrians hunched against the wind, all muted on the other side of the bulletproof glass. Cristiano did not deny it. "I knew." She looked at him and anger flared in her chest, hot and sharp. The kind of anger she rarely allowed herself because she had learned to swallow everything from a young age. "Then why didn't you tell me directly? Why let the lawyer say it? Why play some game with me in the cafe, hinting and then leaving, letting me figure it out, letting me fall apart?" Cristiano looked at her, and for the first time in the dim light inside the car, she saw something on his face she had not expected. Not cold composure, not perfect control, but exhaustion. The kind buried deep beneath the three-piece suit and steel eyes, hidden so well he may have forgotten it was there himself. "Because I know what that feels like," he said slowly, his voice lower than before, as if each word had to be pulled from a place he did not often visit. "Finding out the person you loved most did not die by accident, not from bad luck, not from fate, but because someone decided their life was worth nothing." The car turned onto a wider road, rows of trees retreating into the darkness. "I was 22, he said, his eyes not on her but on the city beyond the window, as if he were looking into the past. "The assassination was staged to look like a medical failure. My father collapsed right in front of me, in the living room. His heart stopped, and I called for an ambulance, and I held him, and I waited." Silence filled the car. They passed an intersection, the red light turning green, the glow sweeping across his face and vanishing. "I held him and told him help was coming, that he would be all right, that I was there. I said it over and over, hundreds of times, until he went cold in my arms. And when the ambulance finally arrived, there was nothing left to save." He turned back to her. His gray eyes were dry, but there was something in them Celeste recognized immediately, because she saw it every day in the mirror. A crack, small and deep, The kind you build the thickest walls around and hope no one ever finds. I didn't tell you outright in the cafe because I knew it would destroy you, and I wanted you to hear it from someone more neutral than me, because if I said it," he paused, "you would think I was exploiting you, manipulating you, using your pain to bind you to me." Celeste looked at him. The anger in her chest did not disappear, but it changed shape. It no longer aimed at him. It aimed at everything. At Caruso, at Holloway, at the system, at 19 years of lies, at a world that watched her family collapse and never reached out a hand. "And you didn't cry?" she said suddenly, not knowing why she asked, only knowing she needed to. "When your father died, you didn't cry?" Cristiano looked at her for a long moment. "No," he said. "I haven't cried since that night." Celeste nodded. "Me neither," she said softly. "Since my mother died, I don't cry anymore." The car continued in silence. Philadelphia drifted past the windows, streetlights flickering, diners and shuttered shops. People walking through the night unaware that right beside them, inside a black Maybach with darkened glass, two people sat facing each other less than a meter apart, and between them was something neither knew how to name. Not affection, not yet. Not trust, not that far, but recognition, that they were alike, that the world had taken the same thing from both of them, that they had built walls around the wound and lived each day pretending it no longer hurt. Cristiano spoke again, his voice back to normal, the armor sliding into place. "I'm taking you to meet my mother. She's wanted to see you since the day you saved her." Celeste did not say yes and did not say no. She only looked out the window at the city flowing backward behind them, and for the first time since she had stepped into Miranda's office, she was able to breathe. The Valenti estate was not a house. It was a world. The Maybach turned onto a road shaded by old oak trees, the kind Celeste had only ever seen in public parks, not lining someone's private drive, then stopped before an iron gate nearly 3 meters high, black, ornata, the kind of gate you look at and immediately understand exists not for beauty, but to keep the outside world firmly outside. The gate opened. The car glided along a white gravel driveway, 2 rows of oaks standing guard like sentinels, and at the end of it, the mansion appeared. White stone, gray roof, tall windows, ivy climbing the walls, set in a stretch of green lawn so vast, Celeste thought her entire apartment building could fit inside it with room to spare. She stepped out of the car and the air felt different here, cleaner, colder, quieter, as if Chestnut Hill belonged to a completely different city, not the same Philadelphia as the dark alleys of South Philly where she had grown up. Cristiano walked ahead without speaking. The front door was opened by an older man in a black suit, whom Celeste assumed was the butler, and he dipped his head slightly as Cristiano passed without needing to look, the practiced gesture of someone who had spent a lifetime in a world where doors opened as you approached. The hallway was wide, marble floors beneath her feet, oil paintings on the walls, ceilings so high voices echoed like in a cathedral. Celeste followed behind Cristiano, her sneakers making small sounds on the stone, and she wished she could walk more quietly, wished she did not look so out of place here in her worn jeans and thin jacket, like a wrong note in a symphony. Then they reached the east sitting room, and afternoon light poured through tall windows, spilling gold across the wooden floor, across the cream-upholstered sofa, across the woman seated there wrapped in a cashmere throw, her left arm still in a brace, silver hair neatly pinned, and when Celeste entered the room, the woman's face changed. Gianna Valenti. The woman Celeste had knelt beside in a dark alley 4 days earlier, the woman she had kept alive with shaking hands while her own future bled out beside her on cold concrete. That day Gianna had been a gray figure, lips pale, eyes unfocused, breath slipping away. Today she was someone else entirely, warm brown eyes, bright and alive, eyes that had nearly gone dark forever only days ago. And in those eyes, as they looked at Celeste, there was everything at once. Gratitude, pain, relief, and something like love that Celeste had never imagined she could receive from a stranger. "Come here, my dear," Gianna said, her voice trembling slightly as she extended her uninjured hand. Celeste stepped closer, and when Gianna took her hand, warm and soft, gripping it like someone afraid that letting go would mean losing it, something inside Celeste broke open gently, without pain, like ice thawing. "I owe you my life," Gianna said, tears shimmering in her eyes. "There are no words enough to thank you." "You don't owe me anything," Celeste said quietly. "I just did what anyone should do." Gianna smiled, a sad smile of someone who knew that wasn't true, that an entire city had walked past her that morning and only one person had stopped. "Sit with me. Tell me about you." And Celeste sat. She did not plan to tell much. She never did. But Gianna listened in the way very few people in this world listen, with deep attention, with patient silence, with eyes that never looked away, never judged, never hurried, the kind of listening that makes you feel truly seen, perhaps for the first time in your life. And so Celeste told her. She told her about her mother, about the years her mother struggled alone to raise 2 daughters after her father died, about the illness her mother hid until she no longer could, about the final night in the hospital, the smell of disinfectant, the white lights, her mother's hand growing colder in hers. She told her about the promise. Take care of Maya. Don't let her live like we did. She told her about the 8 years she had kept that promise at all costs, through every hour of work, every meal she gave up, every sleepless night, every moment she wanted to quit, but looked at Maya and kept going. She told her about fear, the fear of not being good enough, the fear that one mistake would prove she did not belong, the fear that no matter how hard she tried, she would still fail, just like the system had failed her mother. Gianna listened to all of it. She did not interrupt. She did not offer hollow comfort. She did not say everything would be all right. She simply sat there, holding Celeste's hand, listening as if this young woman's story were the most important thing in the world at that moment. When Celeste finished, silence lingered. The afternoon light had shifted across the floor, longer and more golden now, and the room was so quiet Celeste could hear the ticking of a clock somewhere behind her. Then Gianna spoke, her voice soft but steady, the voice of someone who had lost much, and therefore knew how to speak of loss without making it heavier. "My husband was taken from us in an assassination disguised as a stroke, right in front of my son," she said. "His heart stopped, and we called for help, and we waited, and help did not come in time. The system failed my family, just as it failed yours." She paused, her eyes drifting to the window before returning to Celeste. "Money, power, reputation, none of it saved my husband. And when I lay in that alley, bleeding, cold, while the city walked past me, none of it meant anything. The only thing that mattered was you. A girl I had never met, kneeling beside me, keeping me alive with her bare hands while giving up everything she had." Celeste's eyes burned. She bit her lip, swallowing tears the way she had done thousands of times before. But this time it was harder, because Gianna's words were not empty comfort. They were truth, spoken by someone who understood loss, and truth is always sharper than any blade. "Your mother would be so proud of you. You know that," Gianna said gently, giving Celeste's hand a small squeeze. "You became exactly what she hoped you would be. Someone who sees others, someone who does not walk away, someone who keeps her promises." And that sentence broke Celeste. Tears spilled before she could stop them. Silent, without sobs, just warm tracks down her cheeks. And she did not wipe them away because in this room, with this woman, she did not need to pretend she was strong. She had spent 3 years wondering if she was good enough, if she belonged anywhere, if the promise she made to her mother was too heavy for her narrow shoulders. But sitting here in the sunlit room, holding the hand of the woman she had saved, hearing that her mother would be proud, Celeste felt something shift inside her, small and fragile, like a sprout cracking through frozen ground. Not healing. The wound was still there, but perhaps the beginning of healing. And at the doorway, unseen by both Gianna and Celeste, Cristiano stood still. He leaned his shoulder against the frame, arms crossed, and he watched the 2 women speak the entire time without saying a word. But when Celeste cried, when her tears fell silently and his mother held her hand like the daughter she never had, Cristiano's hand tightened, slowly, firmly, into a fist. Not in anger, but because something he had buried for 14 years, something he had built his thickest walls around, something he believed he had killed long ago, stirred, weak and aching, like a heart beating again after too long. He did not know what to call it. He only knew that for the first time in many years, he wanted to protect someone not out of obligation, not out of debt, but for something else entirely, and that was more dangerous than any bullet. November 20th. Celeste woke at 5 in the morning, not because of an alarm clock, but because she could not sleep. She lay in the darkness of the apartment, listening to Maya's steady breathing, listening to the pipes leaking inside the walls, listening to her own heart beating down the hours, to the moment when her future would be decided by a panel of people who had never had to choose between a human life and an exam. She got up, went into the bathroom, turned on the tap, and looked at herself in the mirror. Dark circles under her eyes, hollowed cheeks, hair that needed washing but had already been washed the night before because today she wouldn't have time. She opened the closet. 2 everyday outfits, both worn thin from too many washes, and the black dress. She had bought it at the Goodwill thrift store on Passyunk Avenue 3 days earlier for $7.99, money she had thought about for 2 days before spending, because $7 now was $7 that could feed Maya for 2 days. But she needed it, because today she would stand before the disciplinary committee, and she needed them to see a serious nursing student, not the cleaning woman in old jeans and worn sneakers. She put the dress on. It was a little loose at the waist because she was thinner than the last time she had eaten 3 full meals a day, and the sleeves were a little long, but it was clean, it was black, it was respectable enough. She looked back at the mirror and tried to see someone strong enough to face what was coming. She wasn't sure she did. Maya woke at 6, and when she stepped out of bed and saw her sister already dressed in a dress, hair neatly tied back, standing at the kitchen table drinking coffee without milk, because the milk had run out 2 days earlier. Maya's eyes widened. Today, right? Today. Maya didn't ask anything else. She knew about the hearing, not because Celeste had told her, but because Maya was 18, sharing a space so small that no secrets could be hidden, and she had read the email on Celeste's phone screen when Celeste had fallen asleep at the kitchen table 3 nights earlier. She didn't say she knew. She simply put on the nicest clothes she had, tied her hair the same way her sister did, and said she was coming with her. Celeste wanted to say no, wanted to tell Maya to go to school as usual, that she didn't need to see her sister stand in front of a panel begging for a second chance. But Maya looked at her with their mother's eyes, the eyes Celeste could never say no to, and she nodded. They took the bus to campus at 7:30. The hearing started at 9. The administrative building lobby was empty in the early morning. White lights, polished stone floors. The smell of floor cleaner Celeste recognized instantly because she used the same cleaner every night. Maya held her hand as they walked down the hallway, and Celeste squeezed back, tight, like someone clinging to the only thing keeping her grounded. They reached the committee room on the 2nd floor at the end of the hall, and Celeste saw B. Jackson. She was mopping the floor nearby, slow and steady, like every morning. But when Celeste passed, B looked up, and she didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She simply nodded. A slow, solid nod, the kind soldiers give each other before stepping into battle. "Go on, child." Celeste nodded back, and then she saw him. Cristiano stepped out from the far end of the hallway, and even inside a university building on a Wednesday morning, he still looked like he didn't belong here, like a wolf that had wandered into a living room. Charcoal gray suit, white shirt, no tie, hair neat, polished leather shoes. And the way he walked, even, controlled, neither rushed nor slow, made 2 security guards near the elevator fall silent mid-conversation and watch him pass. Tommaso stood farther back near the elevator doors, stone-faced, arms crossed, eyes sweeping the hallway like someone checking a room before the boss enters. Cristiano stopped in front of Celeste, and he looked at her, at the thrift store black dress, at the neatly tied hair, at the hollow but unbowed eyes, at the hand gripping her sister's, and something in those gray eyes shifted, light and fast, like sunlight breaking through a cloud before vanishing. "Are you ready?" "I don't know." Then he did something Celeste didn't expect. He stepped closer, closer than usual, close enough that she caught the familiar scent of sandalwood, close enough to feel the warmth of him in the cold hallway air. And he lifted his hand, gently, slowly, and fixed the collar of her dress. It was folded inward. Maybe because she'd dressed in a hurry. Maybe because the dress was old and the collar had lost its shape, and his fingers smoothed the fabric, pulled it out, set it in place, careful and precise, a kind of care she had never seen from hands she knew had done brutal things. The gesture lasted no more than 3 seconds, but it was more intimate than anything that had happened between them before. More intimate than the cafe, than the Maybach, than Gianna's living room, and Maya stood beside them watching it all, her eyes moving from Cristiano to her sister and back again, and she didn't say anything, but Celeste knew she was seeing something Celeste herself wasn't ready to name. Cristiano withdrew his hand, stepped back half a step, just enough space for both of them to breathe. "You've been ready for a long time," he said quietly, only for her to hear. "You just haven't believed it yet." Celeste swallowed. Miranda sent everything already? He nodded. All the evidence Miranda had gathered on Dean Holloway, the files on the 23 students, the bank transfers, the photographs, everything had been sent to the disciplinary committee 3 days earlier, through the faculty advocate appointed by the university to support Celeste. Miranda couldn't argue directly at a school hearing. This wasn't a courtroom, but she had made sure every piece of evidence arrived in the right place, at the right time, through proper channels, with the cold precision only Cristiano Valenti's lawyer could guarantee. "You'll speak for yourself," Cristiano said. "Tell the truth. That's all you need to do. The rest, the evidence already speaks." Celeste nodded, but her fingers tightened around Maya's hand, and Cristiano noticed. He looked down at the sisters' joined hands, then back into Celeste's eyes. "I'll be here," he said, the whole time. 2 words. Soft. But the way he said them, the way those gray eyes held hers, wasn't a polite promise, wasn't comfort. It was a vow, the kind that in his world was kept with blood. Celeste took a deep breath. Then she let go of Maya's hand, smoothed her sister's hair, whispered that she'd be okay, turned, and walked toward the committee room door. The door was heavy, like the exam room door she had slammed 14 days earlier, but this time she wasn't there to beg. She was there to take back what was hers. She placed her hand on the handle, and she opened it. The disciplinary committee room was smaller than Celeste had imagined. A long U-shaped table, 5 people seated opposite her. President Dr. Raymond Clark in the center. Gray hair, gold-rimmed glasses, the face of a man who had sat through hundreds of meetings and forgotten the feeling of surprise. On either side of him sat 3 professors and 1 student representative, all upright, pens in hand, expressions so neutral they were almost empty. And to the right, in the chair she had occupied for 15 years with the confidence of someone who believed this room belonged to her, sat Patricia Holloway. Platinum blonde hair perfectly clipped, navy suit, back straight, pale blue eyes swept over Celeste as she entered, and there was nothing on her face except the cold calm of someone certain she would win. Celeste sat in the respondent's chair. Dr. Paul Whitfield, the faculty advocate appointed by the university, sat beside her. Salt and pepper hair, rumpled vest, but sharp, bright eyes, and the way he arranged the folders on the table, precise and methodical, told Celeste this wasn't a man who went through the motions. Behind her, in the seats for observers, Cristiano sat in silence. She didn't turn around. She didn't need to. She knew he was there. Holloway spoke first, and she spoke well. Celeste had to admit that, well, in the way people who are used to bending the truth always do, because they don't lie, they curate the truth. Miss Reyes was absent from the mandatory final examination on November 7th, Holloway said, her voice steady, clear, professional. Program regulations clearly state that the exam room doors close at 7 o'clock, and there are no exceptions for late entry. This is not a new rule. This is a standard communicated to every student from the first day of enrollment. She looked at the committee, one by one, with the confidence of someone playing on her home field. The nursing program trains individuals who will be responsible for patients' lives. Discipline, punctuality, and adherence to rules are not optional. If we make an exception for one student based on emotion, we must make exceptions for all, and our standards will lose their meaning. She paused, long enough for every word to settle into the room. I understand that Miss Reyes believes she did the right thing, but personal belief does not replace regulation. And regulation is clear. Absence from a mandatory examination is a failing grade. No exceptions. Holloway sat back, her expression unchanged, and Celeste felt the room tilt toward her, felt the committee nodding internally, because the argument sounded right. It was logical. It was clean. And that was the most dangerous thing about people like Holloway. They made injustice sound like principle. Dr. Whitfield stood. He opened the folder Miranda Ashford had prepared, and Celeste saw Holloway glance at it. Quick, and for the first time, very faintly, almost imperceptibly, something flickered in those pale blue eyes. Members of the committee, Whitfield said, calm but carrying the weight of someone who knew exactly what cards he held. Before discussing Miss Reyes's individual case, I would like to present several documents related to the broader context of this matter. He turned a page. Over the past 5 years, 23 scholarship students have been dismissed from the nursing program, 100% from low-income families, 100% dismissed for reasons classified as administrative. Holloway straightened, just slightly, but Celeste saw it. During the same period, Whitfield continued, turning the next page. 23 other students were admitted, despite having significantly lower academic scores than those dismissed. And I would like to note for the committee that 7 of those admitted students have direct ties to the Caruso family. Holloway opened her mouth. This is baseless. Whitfield didn't stop. He placed copies of bank transfer records on the table, sliding one toward each committee member. These are copies of transfers from an anonymous account into Dean Holloway's personal account over the past 10 years, totaling more than $400,000. Silence, the kind so heavy Celeste could hear the air conditioning hum above them. President Clark looked down at the records, then up at Holloway. "Patricia, this is slander," Holloway said, her voice still controlled but her neck flushing red. And Celeste realized she hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected anyone to dig this deep. "I have no knowledge of these transactions." Whitfield turned the final page. He placed a photograph on the table, sharp and clear. Patricia Holloway seated across from a man in a restaurant. 2 glasses of wine. Intimate smiles. Warm lighting. This photograph was taken on October 12th, 26 days before today's hearing, at Il Mulino restaurant in Atlantic City. The man across from Dean Holloway is Anthony Caruso, and I would like to remind the committee that Mr. Caruso is currently under investigation by the FBI for organized criminal activity. Holloway stared at the photograph, and for the first time, the calm mask on her face cracked. Not much, but enough. The room stirred softly. President Clark raised a hand for order. Then the door opened, and Beatrice Jackson walked in. She wore a clean white blouse, black trousers, silver hair neatly combed, calloused hands resting at her sides, and she entered the Temple University Disciplinary Committee room, the same way she had entered every room for 35 years, quietly, unseen, unnoticed. But today she wasn't holding a mop. Today she had come to speak. Whitfield nodded. "I would like to introduce Miss Beatrice Jackson, university custodial staff for 35 years, testifying as an observer." B sat in the witness chair, looked at the committee, looked at Holloway, then looked at Celeste. And in her eyes, Celeste saw what B had carried for 35 years, the truth. "For 35 years I've cleaned these buildings," B said, her voice steady, unhurried, solid as stone. "Most people don't know my name. I'm just the old woman with a mop. But I see everything." She looked at Holloway. "And I stayed silent for 35 years because I was afraid of losing my job. Because people like me don't get to speak in the world of people like her. But I've been silent long enough." She turned back to the committee. "I've watched the best students at this school get pushed out. Kids who work nights. Kids who wear the same 2 outfits over and over. Kids who don't have anyone standing behind them. And Dean Holloway finds reasons to remove them, one by one, quietly, neatly, so no one notices. Celeste Reyes saved a life," B said, her voice stronger now, carrying through the room. She knelt beside a woman who was dying while the entire city walked past. She traded her future to keep a human being alive. And she deserves to stand in this program more than anyone I've seen in 35 years. Silence. Holloway stared straight ahead, lips pressed tight, her neck redder. Then Cristiano stood. The room turned, and the air changed. Not because of what he said, but because of his presence, standing in the back row, charcoal suit, broad shoulders, gray eyes sweeping the room once, and everyone felt something shift, gravity changing, like a storm entering the room without making a sound. "Members of the committee," he said, his voice low, even, not loud but filling the space. "I asked to speak as a witness. The woman Miss Reyes saved that morning was my mother, Gianna Valenti." President Clark looked at him. Celeste saw recognition cross his face. Everyone in the room recognized the name. Each reacted differently, some sitting straighter, some looking away, some holding their breath. Cristiano continued. Miss Reyes had 19 minutes to decide. 19 minutes between her future and the life of a stranger. She didn't know who my mother was. She didn't know her name. She didn't know my family. She only saw a human being dying, and she knelt. He looked directly at the committee. Expelling her for that is not protecting standards. It is punishing compassion. And if that is this institution's standard, then this institution does not deserve her. Not the other way around. He sat down. He said nothing more, and the room fell silent enough that Celeste could hear her own heart beating. Strong, steady, and for the first time in 14 days, it wasn't beating from fear. The committee asked everyone to step outside so they could deliberate in private. Celeste stood, her legs slightly unsteady, and walked into the hallway. Maya rushed to her immediately, took her hand without a word, just held on tight, and Celeste squeezed back because right now she needed her sister more than anything else. Cristiano followed her out and stopped a few steps away, leaning his back against the opposite wall, hands in his pockets, his face unreadable, but his eyes never left the door to the committee room, like a man guarding something he refused to lose. Bea came out last, quietly, and walked straight to her cleaning cart parked at the end of the hallway, picked up her mop, and began to clean, slow and steady, as if she hadn't just stood before a university disciplinary board and spoken the truth she'd hidden for 35 years. Holloway exited after that. She passed Celeste without looking, eyes straight ahead, back rigid, but her steps were faster than usual, and Celeste noticed her grip on the leather briefcase was so tight, her knuckles had gone white. She turned into the restroom at the end of the hall and didn't come out for the entire closed session, 30 minutes. Celeste sat on a plastic chair in the hallway, Maya beside her with her head resting on Celeste's shoulder, and those 30 minutes stretched longer than any 30 minutes of her life, longer than the night she sat in the dark calculating impossible numbers, longer than the 14 minutes she waited for the ambulance in the alley that morning. She stared at her worn sneakers against the polished stone floor and thought about all the times she had walked these halls, pushing a cleaning cart, wiping corners, scrubbing sinks, invisible, unseen, and now she was sitting here waiting for this floor to decide whether she was allowed to continue. Cristiano didn't sit. He stood the entire 30 minutes, his back against the wall, eyes forward, and now and then his phone vibrated in his vest pocket, but he didn't take it out, didn't look, didn't move, as if his entire empire could wait, but the girl sitting on that plastic chair could not. Then the door opened. President Clark stepped out, his expression serious but with something in his eyes that Celeste didn't dare name. "Miss Reyes, please come in." Celeste stood. Her legs didn't shake this time. She walked in. The committee sat still, faces neutral, but the air in the room had changed, lighter, or maybe she imagined it, or maybe she didn't. Clark stood holding a sheet of paper. The disciplinary committee has reviewed the full record and heard testimony from all relevant parties. Miss Reyes, after careful consideration, the committee has reached the following decision. He paused. First, you are fully reinstated in the nursing program as a student in good standing. Second, your full scholarship is restored, effective immediately. Third, you will be permitted to retake the final examination on a date arranged by the department. Celeste heard the words, but they arrived slowly, as if moving through water, and she had to let him finish and then replay them in her mind before she believed they were real. In addition, Clark continued, his voice heavier, the committee has serious concerns regarding the evidence presented about student management practices over the past 5 years. Dean Holloway is suspended effective immediately pending the outcome of an internal investigation. The files of all students dismissed during her tenure as dean will be reopened and reviewed individually. He looked at Celeste. The committee recognizes that your actions on the morning of November 7th were not a failure of discipline. They were an expression of the very core values this nursing program is committed to teaching. He folded the paper. We wish you success in completing the remainder of your program. Celeste opened her mouth to say thank you, but no sound came out. She nodded once, then again, turned, and walked out. The hallway, Maya looked at her face, and Celeste didn't need to say anything. Her face said it all. Maya threw herself into her, 18-year-old arms wrapping tight, her face buried in Celeste's shoulder, and she cried for both of them, cried the tears Celeste had held back for 14 days, and Celeste held her, stroked her hair, whispering, "It's okay, it's okay, it's okay," over and over like a lullaby, and this time it was true. Cristiano stood a few steps away. He didn't come closer, he didn't intrude, he just watched the sisters holding each other. And on that stone face, for a moment so brief it could be missed in a blink, Celeste saw something soft, something warm, then it vanished, and the armor slid back into place. But she had seen it, and she wouldn't forget. Then the restroom door at the end of the hall opened. Holloway stepped out. She had regained her composure, or at least the appearance of it, back straight, chin lifted, but her eyes were red and the foundation didn't quite hide it, and she headed straight for the stairs, fast and decisive, like someone trying to leave before the place swallowed her whole. But she stopped as she passed Celeste. stopped completely, and she turned. "You think you won?" Holloway said, her voice low, just enough for the two of them to hear. And beneath the forced calm was something sharp, something dangerous, something Celeste recognized instantly because she'd seen it in the eyes of people with nothing left to lose. "You don't know who you're playing with, Miss Reyes. You don't know what arena you've just stepped into." Celeste opened her mouth, but before she could speak, a figure moved between them. Cristiano. He didn't face Holloway. He stood beside Celeste, his shoulder nearly touching hers, and he looked down at Holloway because he was a full head taller, and that look wasn't angry, wasn't threatening. It was worse. It was completely calm, the calm of someone who had heard hundreds of threats and didn't care because none of them ever came true. "You should be concerned about yourself, Dean Holloway," he said, his voice low, even, almost polite. "The FBI is very interested in those bank transfers." Holloway looked at him, and for a second, Celeste saw real fear in those pale blue eyes. Not fear of losing a job, not fear of losing status, but fear of something far bigger, something only people who knew Anthony Caruso truly feared. She turned away and hurried down the stairs. The sound of her heels echoed, then faded. Celeste exhaled. She looked back down the hall. Maya was wiping her tears, smiling. That bright 18-year-old smile lighting up the gray corridor. B. Jackson was mopping near the stairs, her back to them, slow and steady, like every other day, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just stood up and told the truth after 35 years of silence. But when Celeste looked closer, she saw B's shoulders trembling slightly, and she understood that B. Jackson was crying with her back turned so no one would see, the way she had lived her entire life, doing the most important things unseen. Then Celeste looked farther down the hallway, near the east stairwell, and she saw them, 4 people, 3 young women and 1 young man, standing there in silence, watching her. She didn't know their names, but she recognized them, recognized the worn shoes, recognized the hand-washed clothes, recognized the eyes of people who had been pushed out and were waiting for a door to open again, waiting for someone to prove that the system could be wrong and that the system could be fixed. 4 students from the 23 Holloway had dismissed. They stood there without speaking, but in their eyes was something Celeste recognized instantly because she had just reclaimed it for herself. Hope. Celeste looked at them, then at Maya, then at B, then at Cristiano, and she understood that she hadn't fought only for herself. She never had. But today's victory wouldn't be the last thing she'd have to face, because Holloway was afraid. And frightened people always run toward someone stronger than themselves. And the man stronger than Holloway was Caruso. And Caruso wasn't the kind of man who accepted defeat. That night, Celeste allowed herself to believe that everything would be all right. She and Maya ate dinner of instant noodles, the cheapest kind. But tonight they tasted better than ever, because for the first time in 2 weeks, the air in their tiny apartment felt lighter, and Maya laughed more, talking about a friend at school, about a math test she thought she'd done well on, about a college scholarship program her teacher had encouraged her to apply for. And Celeste listened, nodded, smiled, and thought that maybe, just maybe, this time the universe would leave her alone. She was wrong. Celeste went to her bar shift that night from 8 until 1 in the morning, because even though her scholarship had been restored, 2 months of unpaid rent still existed, and the landlord didn't care about hearings or compassion. Maya stayed home, the door locked, the safety chain on, like every other night. Celeste reached the building at 1:30 in the morning. The stairwell was darker than usual because the 3rd floor light was broken again, and no one had replaced it. She climbed to the 5th floor, legs aching, back sore, the smell of beer and disinfectant clinging to her clothes, and when she reached the apartment door, she stopped. The door was ajar, the safety chain hung broken. The lock had been forced, metal bent, pry marks clear on the rotting wooden frame. Celeste's heart skipped a beat. Maya. She pushed the door open, and the world inside the apartment had changed. The closet doors gaped open, belongings thrown across the floor, kitchen drawers yanked out and overturned, the mattress tipped on its side, books, clothes, dishes, everything the sisters owned, which wasn't much, lay scattered as if someone hadn't searched for anything but had torn the place apart to send a message. And the message was on the wall, red paint. Large, uneven, handwritten letters, deliberately awkward, the kind written with the left hand so no one could recognize it. Valenti can't protect you forever. Maya, Celeste called, her voice breaking in the wrecked room. "Maya!" A sound came from the bathroom. The door opened, and Maya stood there, curled into the corner between the sink and the wall, eyes red, face pale, phone clenched in her hand, shaking from head to toe. "Sis." Her voice trembled until every syllable cracked. "Someone came. I heard the door break. I hid in the bathroom and locked it. I heard them tearing everything apart. Then they left. I didn't dare come out." Celeste wrapped her arms around her, holding her so tightly she could feel her bones through the thin fabric, feel the 18-year-old body shaking in her arms, and a fury ignited in her chest, not the kind of anger she knew, the kind she swallowed and endured, but something new, hot, sharp, the anger of someone who had endured too long and had just reached the final line. They had touched her sister. They had frightened Maya. Maya, the child she had promised her mother to protect, the only person in the world she would die for. Then Celeste's phone vibrated. An unknown number. She answered. A man's voice, low, cold, not Cristiano's. She knew Cristiano's voice. This one was thinner, sharper, edged with contempt. "Your father made a mistake 19 years ago, and he paid for it. Don't repeat that mistake, Miss Reyes. Next time it won't be the apartment." Silence. Then the line went dead. Celeste stared at the phone. Then at the red-painted words on the wall. Then at Maya, eyes still red, still shaking, still 18 years old and never meant to know a world this cruel. And Celeste did something she had sworn 2 weeks earlier she would never do. She called Cristiano Valenti. Not because she trusted him, not because she wanted to owe him more, but because Maya was shaking in her arms and she no longer had the strength to pretend she could protect her alone from this. He answered after half a ring, as if he'd been waiting. "Celeste, they came to my apartment," she said, her voice calmer than she expected, the calm of someone who had crossed past fear into the territory beyond it, where only resolve remained. "Maya was home when they came. My sister was home." Silence for 1 second. 2. Then Cristiano's voice came through, and for the first time since she'd met him, it wasn't calm. It was lower, heavier. There was something underneath it she'd never heard before, something primal, dangerous, something the people who worked for him would recognize instantly and begin to fear. "Lock yourselves in the bathroom. Stay inside. Don't open the door for anyone. I'll be there in 15 minutes. He arrived in 12. Celeste heard his footsteps on the stairs before she heard the elevator, because he didn't wait for it. He took the stairs up 5 floors, and when he appeared in the doorway, breathing slightly faster than usual, suit still immaculate, but his tie loosened as if he'd been wearing it when he took the call and hadn't bothered to fix it. Celeste looked into his eyes and saw something she'd never seen before. Real emotion. Not armor, not controlled calm, but rage, the kind he usually kept buried because if he let it surface, someone would die. And she knew that instinctively, knew that the man standing in her doorway was the version of Cristiano Valenti that the Philadelphia underworld feared. And threaded through that rage, deeper, more carefully hidden, was something else. Worry. Real worry. Not obligation, not debt, but for her. He stepped inside, took in the ransacked apartment, took in the red-painted words on the wall, his jaw clenched so hard she could see the muscle rise beneath his skin. Then he saw Maya standing behind Celeste, eyes wide with fear, and something in his anger shifted, not diminishing but focusing, sharper, colder, the anger of a man who had decided exactly what he would do and to whom. "Caruso," he said, one word, and it sounded like a sentence. "There won't be another time." Then he looked at Celeste. "You and Maya are coming to the estate. Tonight. I can't. This isn't a request, Celeste." His voice stayed low, but beneath it was something she hadn't expected. Not command, but something closer to a plea. The kind men like him didn't know how to speak, so they wrapped it in orders. "Maya needs to be safe. You need to be safe. And I need to know you're safe." The last sentence he said more softly than the others. And it didn't sound like a Mafia boss speaking to someone he was protecting out of debt. It sounded like something else. Celeste looked at him, then at Maya. Her sister stood in the wrecked apartment, 18 years old, trembling, and behind her the red-painted message still wet, dripping toward the floor like blood. Celeste had promised her mother to protect Maya, at any cost. And sometimes any cost meant accepting help from someone she didn't fully understand, didn't fully trust, but who was the only one strong enough to stand between her sister and the darkness. She looked at Cristiano. "Okay," she said. He nodded. "Turn to Tommaso in the doorway. 20 minutes. And get more men to guard this building until I'm done." Celeste went into the bedroom and gathered what remained among the ruins. 2 outfits for herself. 2 for Maya. Maya's books. The only family photograph she still had. Her parents standing in front of their old South Philly house. 8-year-old Celeste, perched on her father's shoulders. Maya still in their mother's belly. All of them smiling. And that photograph was the one thing in this apartment she would never leave behind. She packed everything into 1 backpack and 1 duffel bag. Their entire lives fit into 2 bags. They left the apartment, down the stairs, out to the street. The Maybach waited. And when Celeste settled into the seat, Maya leaned her head on her shoulder, her eyes already closed from exhaustion, and as the car rolled into the night, leaving South Philadelphia, leaving the dark street, leaving the 5th-floor apartment with the red-painted words on the wall, Celeste looked out the window and thought she was leaving her old world behind, and the world she was entering, with iron gates, white stone mansions, and the gray-eyed man sitting across from her in the dark, was more dangerous than any alley in South Philly. But at least, in that world, Maya would be safe, and that was all that mattered. Maya woke up the next morning and thought she was dreaming. Celeste knew that because she heard her sister take a deep breath and whisper, "Sis, where are we?" Her voice not frightened but filled with wonder, the kind of wonder of a child who grew up in a 400-square-foot apartment with damp walls and then suddenly woke up in a bedroom with a 10-foot ceiling, silk curtains, a bed larger than their old bathroom, and sunlight pouring through tall windows onto polished oak floors she'd only ever seen on screens. Maya sat up, eyes wide, and touched the sheets as if afraid they might disappear. Then she looked out the window, at the stretch of green lawn beneath rows of oak trees, at the stone fountain in the center of the courtyard, at the rose hedges lining the path. And then she turned back to Celeste with eyes just like their mother's, bright and alive, and said, "Sis, did you see the bathtub? It has feet, brass feet, like in movies." Celeste smiled, and for the first time in days, it wasn't forced, because seeing Maya excited the way an 18-year-old should be excited, not trembling, not hiding in a bathroom, not staring at red paint on a wall, made her feel that coming here had been the right decision, whatever the cost. Gianna welcomed them in the breakfast room, and she welcomed Maya the same way she'd welcomed Celeste the first time, with warmth that didn't feel rehearsed, with a smile that creased the corners of her eyes, with a hand that took Maya's and gently pulled her closer. "Sit next to me. How do you like your eggs?" "I told the kitchen to make pancakes too. You're too thin, just like your sister." Maya looked at Gianna, then at Celeste, then at the long dining table that could seat 12, with white linens, porcelain dishes, and fresh flowers in the center, and she sat down beside Gianna with a natural ease that surprised Celeste, because Maya was usually shy around strangers, but Gianna had something Celeste had felt from the first moment she met her, an ability to make you feel like you belonged, even when every piece of evidence said you didn't. Cristiano arrived late. He stepped into the dining room while Maya was laughing at something Gianna had said, and the room shifted instantly, not because he intended it to, but because that was the nature of his presence. It occupied space. It altered gravity. It made everything around it sharper. He sat at the head of the table, poured himself coffee, black, no sugar, and said nothing. Celeste sat across from him, also saying nothing. Gianna and Maya talked enough for the entire table. But between Celeste and Cristiano there was silence. Not awkward, not strained, but the kind shared by 2 people who had said enough in recent days, and now only needed to sit in the same space, without filling it with words. He read the news on his tablet. She drank coffee with milk that the cook had added without asking. Sometimes their eyes met across the table, brief, fleeting, and each time Celeste looked away first, because she wasn't ready for what she saw in his gray eyes when the morning light touched them, a warmth she hadn't believed could exist there. The day passed slowly in the estate. Gianna took Maya through the house like an honored guest, telling her she could read any book she liked in the library, that the rose garden had been planted 20 years earlier, that there was a piano in the music room if she wanted to play. Celeste stayed in the bedroom with her laptop, studying for her retake exam, because it was coming and she wouldn't let anything stop her this time. But that night she couldn't sleep. Not because the bed wasn't comfortable. It was the most comfortable bed she'd ever known. But because she was used to the sound of leaking pipes, neighbors arguing, ambulances passing by, and the perfect silence of the Chestnut Hill estate was too vast, too deep, too full of space for her thoughts. She went downstairs at 1 a.m. to get water, and she heard a voice from the study at the end of the hall. The door ajar, a strip of lamplight spilling onto the wooden floor. Cristiano's voice, but not the one she knew. Not the warm, low voice he'd used with his mother at breakfast. Not the quiet, steady voice that had told her she'd be safe. This voice was cold, utterly cold, without warmth or emotion, like steel, like winter, like a blade cutting through bone. I'm not asking what he said. I don't care what he said. I'm asking if you handled it. Silence from the other end of the line. Then Cristiano spoke again, slower now, each word heavy as a bullet. If I have to ask a second time, you'll be sitting at the same table as him, not a metaphor. Celeste stood there, barefoot on the cold floor, a glass of water in her hand, listening to the man who had sat quietly drinking coffee across from her that morning order, the elimination of a traitor, in a voice she didn't recognize, the voice of a boss, of a kingpin, of the man whose name Philadelphia whispered in the dark. Then he hung up and turned, and saw her standing in the hallway, barefoot, glass in hand, eyes wide. They looked at each other through the crack in the door, and what happened on Cristiano's face in that instant was something Celeste would remember for a long time. It changed completely, like one light being switched off and another turned on, the ruthless coldness vanishing not gradually but instantly, replaced by something she'd glimpsed before, but never this clearly: softness, worry, vulnerability, and something like shame, like a child caught doing something he never wanted anyone to see. Celeste. She didn't run or step back. She stood there and looked at him, and in her mind 2 images overlapped: the man who'd just ordered someone's destruction with a merciless voice, and the man looking at her now with eyes that held something close to fear, fear that she'd seen, fear she'd see him differently, fear that whatever had just begun between them would die before it had a chance to grow. 2 worlds in one person, and she stood at the boundary. She didn't say anything, and neither did he. She lifted the glass, took a sip, then turned and walked toward the kitchen, unhurried, because running would mean fear, and she wasn't afraid of him. She just didn't yet know what to do with everything she'd seen. She poured more water, and when she turned back, Cristiano stood at the kitchen sink, sleeves rolled up, water running as he washed his face, as if he too needed to cleanse something away. And she saw it, on his right arm from wrist to elbow, as the sleeves were pushed back and water ran over his skin. Scars emerging under the kitchen light. Not one but many, long and short, old and newer, overlapping like a map of a life she couldn't imagine. Some looked like knife wounds, some like burns. One long, straight, deep scar ran from the middle of his forearm nearly to the elbow, healed but still puckered and pink, still telling its story to anyone who looked. Celeste looked. Cristiano knew she was looking. He didn't pull his sleeves down, didn't hide or explain. He just kept washing his face, slow and deliberate, then turned off the water, took a towel, and when he lowered it, his gray eyes met hers in the mirror above the sink. They looked at each other in the reflection, saying nothing, and that silence said more than any conversation they'd ever had. It said he knew she'd seen both versions of him, the killer and the man standing here now, exhausted and scarred, and that he wasn't apologizing, but he wasn't pretending either. And it said she wasn't running, that she was still here, and that it mattered to him more than he would ever admit. Cristiano rolled his sleeves down slowly, button by button. "You should sleep," he said quietly, his voice back to normal or close to it, though his eyes held hers for one more second before looking away. "You have review tomorrow." Celeste nodded, set her glass in the sink a few inches from his hand, close enough to feel the warmth but not touch, and walked back to the bedroom. She didn't look back, but she knew he stood there watching until she disappeared around the corner. And that night, lying in the most comfortable bed of her life with Maya breathing evenly beside her, safe, Celeste closed her eyes and saw 2 things: the scars on his arm and the gray eyes in the mirror looking at her as if she were the one thing in his life he didn't know how to handle. 3 days passed in the Valenti estate, and Celeste began to understand the rhythm of life there. In the mornings, Gianna and Maya ate breakfast together, as if they had known each other in another lifetime. Gianna telling stories, Maya laughing, and Celeste watching her sister be happy without having to pretend. In the afternoons, Celeste studied in the library, a room that held more books than she had read in her entire life. In the evenings, Cristiano came home late, sometimes very late, and she heard the car enter the driveway at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning. Then the sound of footsteps on the stairs, steady, heavy, exhausted, and she lay in the dark listening as those footsteps passed her door and moved away, not understanding why she was waiting to hear them. On the fourth night, she couldn't sleep. The retake exam was the day after tomorrow, and she had studied until the words danced in front of her eyes. But that wasn't why she was awake. It was because every time she closed her eyes, she saw those gray eyes in the kitchen mirror looking at her, and she hated that she was thinking about it, hated that she remembered the way his sleeves had been rolled up and water had run over his scars, hated that she wanted to know the story behind every one of them, even though she knew she shouldn't. She went downstairs, not to the kitchen this time. She passed through the living room, along the west hall, to the glass doors that opened onto the large balcony overlooking the garden. She opened the door and stepped outside, and the November night air touched her skin, cold and sharp, but clean in a way the air in her old South Philly apartment never was. The night sky over Chestnut Hill held more stars than she expected, or maybe she had never looked up long enough to notice. Then she saw him. Cristiano was already there, standing at the corner of the balcony, leaning against the stone railing, a glass of whiskey in his hand, white shirt open at the collar, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, no suit, no armor, and in the moonlight he looked different, softer, more tired, younger, closer to the man he hid behind the three-piece suits and steel eyes. He turned when he heard the door, and for a moment, before the calm slid back into place, Celeste saw surprise on his face, and then something else, pleasure. "You couldn't sleep either?" he asked. "The bed is too comfortable," she said. "I'm used to sleeping on a mattress with springs stabbing my back." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "I can arrange a worse mattress if you want." She walked to the railing, stopping at a distance that felt just right. Not too close, not too far, the distance they had unconsciously maintained for 3 days now, as if there were an invisible line neither of them dared cross. The garden stretched below them, the roses Gianna had planted 20 years earlier, the shadows of the oak trees long on the grass under the moonlight, the fountain silent for the night, and beyond it all, the city lights flickering at the horizon, Philadelphia glowing from afar, beautiful from afar, safe from afar. "Your mother told me to eat more," Celeste said. "Today she made me drink 2 glasses of milk." "She makes everyone drink milk," he said. "I'm 36 years old and she still leaves a glass of milk on my nightstand every night." Celeste looked at him. The most feared Mafia boss in Philadelphia drinking milk before bed because his mother made him. And Cristiano Valenti laughed, really laughed. Not just a twitch of his mouth, not the ghost of a smile, but a real sound, low and rough and brief, as if his throat had forgotten how to make it and was learning again. And it was the most beautiful sound Celeste had ever heard from him, more beautiful than the deep voice that told her she would be safe, more beautiful than any words he had spoken, because it was real, completely real, with no armor between that laughter and the world. "Don't tell anyone," he said, the smile still in his eyes. "It would destroy my reputation." Celeste smiled, and the distance between them suddenly felt smaller, even though neither of them moved. Silence returned, but it was warmer now, closer, the kind of silence you wanted to stay inside rather than break. Then the wind shifted, and Celeste shivered lightly, wearing only thin sleepwear and no jacket, and she was about to turn back inside when Cristiano stepped closer, closer than the invisible line they had held for 3 days, close enough that she smelled the whiskey on his breath, the familiar sandalwood on his skin, felt the heat of his body through the thin cotton of his shirt. He lifted his hand, slowly, very slowly, like someone afraid of breaking something fragile, and his palm touched her cheek. His hand was warm, his fingers long, and they trembled. Celeste felt it clearly. The faint shake in fingers she knew could sign orders that ended lives. Fingers that didn't shake when he gave commands over the phone in the middle of the night, but trembled when they touched her face. And that told her more than any confession ever could. He looked at her and she looked back, and in his gray eyes under the moonlight there was no steel, no armor. Only the man. Only him. 36 years old, scarred and burdened and dark, standing on a balcony with his hand trembling on her cheek, looking for the first time like someone who was afraid. "Celeste," he said her name low and rough, like a prayer, like a request. She didn't speak. She leaned into his palm instead, just slightly, closed her eyes, and that was her answer. He kissed her, slowly, very slowly, his lips brushing hers so gently. At first she wasn't sure it was a kiss or just breath, until she knew, because his mouth was warm and soft and the kiss deepened, unhurried, without demand, the kiss of someone who had waited a long time and didn't want to rush now, the kiss of someone who knew this moment might be the only good thing he ever got and wanted it to last. His hand stayed on her cheek. Her hand came to rest on his chest, over his heart, and she felt the beat beneath the fabric, fast and strong and uncontrolled. And for the first time she knew that Cristiano Valenti, the man Philadelphia feared, had a racing heart when he stood this close to her. They pulled apart slowly, foreheads resting together, breath mingling in the cold air, turning to small clouds that vanished as soon as they formed. "I can't promise a normal life," he said hoarsely, eyes still closed, forehead still touching hers. And in his voice was a truth she had never heard before, the truth of a man offering her the worst version of reality because he respected her too much to lie. "I am what you saw last night. I am that midnight call. I am those scars, and I will always be this way. I can't change. Not because I don't want to, but because if I stop, the people I love will die." She opened her eyes and looked at him from less than a breath away. "I've never had a normal life," she said quietly. "My father was killed. My mother died because the system abandoned her. I grew up in an apartment with rats and gunshots outside the window. I've been raising my sister since I was 19. Normal is a luxury I've never had, and I've lived just fine without it." He opened his eyes, and in their gray depths, Celeste saw something she suspected very few people ever had. Real vulnerability, unguarded, in a man who had built the highest walls around his heart and had just let someone see over them. She placed her hand on his chest again, over his heart, steady this time. "But the man who destroyed my family," she added softly, "I won't need Caruso. I'll handle him myself." And Cristiano laughed for the second time that night. And this time the smile stayed longer, warmer, and he kissed her forehead, slow and lingering, not a kiss of passion but of something deeper, the kiss of a man who had just found something he hadn't known he was searching for. They stood there on the balcony, foreheads together, hands entwined, with Philadelphia lit up on the horizon, as if the city itself were awake, watching, holding its breath. And that night, when Celeste returned to the bedroom and lay down beside Maya sleeping soundly, she touched her fingers to her lips, still warm, and knew she had crossed a line. There was no going back, and she didn't want to. It happened in the afternoon, when Celeste retook the exam. She walked out of the exam room at 4 o'clock, her head light, her hand still aching from writing nonstop for 3 hours, but she knew she had done well, knew every answer had been right because she had studied until the knowledge lived in her bones, and she stepped into the hallway with something close to joy, for the first time in a very long while. She took out her phone. 5 missed calls from Tommaso, 3 from Cristiano, and 1 video message from an unknown number. She opened the video, and the world collapsed. Maya, her sister, was sitting on a metal chair, her hands zip-tied behind her back, her mouth sealed with tape, her eyes red, her cheeks wet, and behind her was the old brick wall of a warehouse, sickly yellow light, a filthy concrete floor. Celeste recognized the place, not because she had ever been there, but because Miranda had shown her photographs. The warehouse by the Delaware River, where her father had worked the night shift, where he had seen something he shouldn't have seen, where everything had begun 19 years earlier, and now his daughter was sitting there, bound to a metal chair, in the very place where her family's life had first been destroyed. Then a man's voice came through the video, his face unseen, only the voice, and Celeste recognized it, the voice from the phone call the night their apartment was torn apart. Thin, sharp, dripping with contempt. "Ms. Reyes. The old warehouse at Pier 17. You know the place. Your father knew it. Alone. No Valenti. No police. Before midnight. Or your sister will leave this place the same way your father did." The video ended. Celeste stood in the middle of the university hallway, students walking past on both sides, laughing, ordinary, and she stood there with her phone shaking in her hand, and the sensation that the floor was opening beneath her feet. Then she ran. Out the door, down the steps, onto the sidewalk. She didn't think. She didn't plan. She only knew Maya was there and she had to go. The Maybach was parked at the curb, Tommaso standing beside it, his face pale, and when she rushed over, she saw Cristiano already inside the car, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice the same one she had heard that night in the hallway. Cold, sharp, stripped of anything human. And when she opened the door, he looked at her, and she saw the storm in his gray eyes. "I will go alone," she said. He said alone. "No," his voice allowed no argument. "Maya is my sister. She is my responsibility, and he will kill her if he sees your men. Celeste." He grabbed her hand, hard, and for the first time she saw fear on Cristiano Valenti's face. Not fear for himself, but fear for her, the kind of fear he likely hadn't felt since the night his father died in his arms. Caruso doesn't keep his word. If you walk in there alone, you won't walk out. He looked at her. "And I can't lose you." 4 words, spoken softly, spoken truthfully, spoken like a realization forming as he said them. Celeste looked at him, then said, her voice steadier than she felt, "Then don't let me lose Maya." Cristiano closed his eyes for 1 second, then opened them, and in his eyes, the storm was gone, replaced by absolute focus, cold, precise, terrifying, the look of a man who had made a decision, and from this second on, everything would move according to his will. He called Tommaso and gave orders, fast, clipped, surgical. Alpha team surrounds from the north side of the pier, Beta from the river. 2 shooters on the roofs of warehouses, 15 and 19. No one fires until I give the order. And call Anderson at the FBI. Tell him I have Anthony Caruso's location, and if he wants him, he has exactly 1 hour to get here. Then he looked at Celeste. "You will go in," like he asked, "alone, but you will carry this." He unfastened the second button of her blouse and clipped a tiny device no bigger than a fingertip inside. A mic. "I will hear everything. And when I come in, you get on the floor, and you don't stand up until I tell you to. Do you understand?" Celeste nodded. The Maybach tore through the Philadelphia night, and 40 minutes later, Celeste stood in front of the warehouse at Pier 17, alone, whined off the Delaware carrying the smell of brine and oil, pale yellow streetlights washing over the old brick wall, and she stared at the rusted metal door her father had walked through every night 19 years earlier. The last door he ever walked through before everything changed, and now she was walking through the same door. She pushed it open. The warehouse was wide, empty, dark, with a single bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting a small circle of light, and in that circle, Maya sat on the metal chair, eyes wide when she saw her sister, tears running down her cheeks beneath the tape. Around her, 4 men with guns stood in the shadows, faces cold, and behind Maya, a man stepped forward, Anthony Caruso, 62 years old, gray hair, black eyes, a face like something from an old black and white photograph, sharp, gaunt, and utterly without mercy. He looked at Celeste and smiled slowly, the smile of a man enjoying a game he had won before it began. "Miguel Reyes's daughter," he said lightly, almost warmly. "You look like your father. Same eyes, same stupidity." Celeste looked at him, straight into the eyes of the man who had ordered her father killed, who had destroyed her family, who had turned her childhood into a nightmare, and she didn't shake. "My father wasn't stupid," she said, her voice echoing in the empty warehouse. "My father was honest, and you were afraid of that, afraid enough to kill a dock worker because he saw something he shouldn't have seen." Caruso's smile vanished. "Careful, little girl. You are standing where your father stood, and you know what happened next." Celeste stepped forward 1 step and spoke, every word clear, every word steady, every word hitting the warehouse like a bullet. "My father didn't die on his knees, and his daughter won't either." Caruso looked at her, and for a second something flickered in his eyes, not fear yet, but recognition that this girl was not what he had expected. Then he nodded to one of the armed men, and in that instant, the warehouse exploded. The north door blew open. The river door blew open. Floodlights flared. Voices shouted freeze and drop your weapons. And Cristiano's men poured in from every direction. Guns raised, barrel lights slicing through the darkness like blades. Celeste dropped to the floor, shielding Maya, gripping the metal chair, whispering into her ear, "I am here. I am here. It is okay. while chaos erupted around them. Gunfire cracked, brief, violent, then silence. Caruso's 4 gunmen went down fast, clean, precise, and Cristiano came through the main door, gun in hand, his eyes searching for Celeste before they found Caruso. And when he saw her on the floor, holding Maya, something in his shoulders released for 1 second, then locked again. Caruso stood alone in the center of the warehouse, unarmed, staring at Cristiano with the look of a man who knew he had lost but refused to accept it. "Mario's son," he said, just like his father. Cristiano raised the gun, and in his gray eyes Celeste saw 14 years of waiting, 14 years of building, 14 years since the night his father died in his arms, and he swore he would find the man behind it. All of it funneled into this moment, finger on the trigger. Then sirens wailed, red and blue lights. The FBI flooded the warehouse 30 seconds later, and Cristiano lowered the gun, slowly, inch by inch, and Celeste saw the cost of that choice, the cost of lowering the weapon instead of pulling the trigger, of choosing justice over revenge, and it nearly broke him. Caruso was cuffed and dragged away, and as they led him out, he looked back at Celeste one last time. But she didn't look at him. She was cutting the ties off Maya's wrists, ripping the tape from her mouth. And when Maya was free, she threw herself into Celeste's arms, holding on until Celeste's bones hurt, sobbing loudly, sobbing like an 18-year-old who was finally allowed to cry. And Celeste held her on the cold concrete floor of the warehouse where their father had stood 19 years earlier, whispering, "You are safe now. I am here. You are safe." The next morning, Celeste heard from Miranda. Patricia Holloway had been arrested by the FBI at her home at 6 a.m. for conspiracy to launder money and obstruction of justice. And when they led her out of the suburban house, the neighbors watched, and she no longer stood straight, no longer wore a navy suit, no longer had that cold, composed mask. Only a woman in pajamas in handcuffs under the flashing lights of police cars. And Celeste didn't feel joy. She only felt tired and light, like someone who had finally set down something she had been carrying for far too long. 1 year later, on a May morning, Celeste Reyes stood in the Grand Hall of Temple University, wearing her graduation gown, the square cap on her head, and when her name was announced over the speakers as valedictorian of the nursing program, she walked onto the stage and looked out at the rows below. Maya sat in the front row, 19 years old, her hair loose, her eyes already red, crying before Celeste even reached for her diploma. And she lifted her hand to wave, the wave of the child Celeste had promised to protect, and had kept that promise to. Gianna sat beside Maya, crying too, not trying to hide it, her hand clasping Maya's, and those 2 women, one old and one young, sitting side by side crying with pride for the same person, looked so much like family that anyone watching would assume they were grandmother and granddaughter. B. Jackson sat behind them, white blouse, silver hair neatly combed, her back straight, and she didn't cry. She only nodded when Celeste looked her way, the same nod as the day she walked into the disciplinary hearing, steady and calm, the kind of nod that says, "I knew you would do it." And Cristiano, he sat in the last row, black suit, gray eyes, and when Celeste took her diploma and searched for him in the crowd, he didn't clap, he didn't cheer, he only looked at her, and on the face the world feared there was a smile, small and real, meant only for her, and it said more than all the applause filling the hall. 6 months after graduation, Celeste opened the first community first aid program in South Philadelphia, free of charge. Every Saturday evening, in the hall of an old church on Passyunk Avenue, she taught neighbors, single mothers, night shift workers, uninsured immigrants, how to stop bleeding, how to resuscitate, how to keep a life alive until help arrives, because she knew better than anyone that sometimes help comes too late. And in those waiting minutes, the hands of ordinary people can be the only thing standing between life and death. The program began with 12 people in the first class. 6 months later, the number had grown to more than 200. 3 other neighborhoods reached out asking to open classes of their own. And when a local reporter asked Celeste why she did this, she answered simply, "Because I was once the girl kneeling beside a stranger in a dark alley, not knowing if I was doing the right thing, and I want people to know that they can do the right thing, that their hands are strong enough, that 19 minutes can change everything." Maya entered college that fall, a full scholarship, a pre-medical program, and the school she chose was not Temple, because she said her sister had fought enough battles there, and she wanted to write her own story. On move-in day, Celeste helped her carry boxes to the dorm, hung clothes in the closet, spread the sheets on the bed, and when Maya hugged her one last time before Celeste left, she whispered, "You kept your promise to Mom." And Celeste held her tighter, because those 8 words were all she needed to hear, to know that every sleepless night, every meal she had given up, every drop of sweat, and every tear had been worth it. Cristiano spent that year doing something no one believed a mafia boss could do. He legalized the Valenti empire piece by piece, contract by contract, subsidiary by subsidiary, slowly and painfully, because it meant letting go of things his family had built with blood over 3 generations. But he did it, not because he suddenly became a good man, he knew he wasn't, but because for the first time in his life, he had a reason to want to wake up every morning without looking over his shoulder. Miranda Ashford handled the legal work. Tommaso still stood at his side, loyal and silent, but now he wore a suit to board meetings, instead of guarding warehouse doors. And Gianna, when she heard her son talk about the plan to go legitimate, didn't cry. She only said, "This is what your father wanted from the beginning," and Cristiano said nothing, but he held his mother's hand longer than usual. On the morning Celeste received the official confirmation of her valedictorian honor, she woke early, not because of an alarm, but because someone's hand was brushing through her hair. Gently and slowly, the kind of touch she could never have imagined Cristiano Valenti capable of a year earlier. She opened her eyes. He lay beside her, gray eyes watching her in the dawn light filtering through the curtains. And in that light, the scars on his arm were only faint lines, a map of a past they were both slowly learning to leave behind. "Come out to the balcony with me," he said softly. They stepped outside, onto the same balcony where their first kiss had happened, but this time it wasn't night. It was dawn. Philadelphia spread out below them, rooftops shimmering under the first sunlight, and from here, South Philadelphia was no longer a gray patch in the distance. It was bright, it was real, it was where she came from, the place that had made her who she was. Celeste leaned back against Cristiano's chest, her back resting against him, his arm wrapped around her waist, and they stood there watching the city wake up. 1 year earlier, she had stood in a dark alley with blood on her hands, and 19 minutes to decide. She had lost an exam, lost her scholarship, lost her apartment, nearly lost herself on the darkest night of her life. But today, standing here, watching the sunrise, she understood. "I didn't lose everything," she said quietly, her voice peaceful in the way only someone who has walked through a storm can be peaceful. "I found everything." Cristiano tightened his arm around her waist, gently, and he kissed her hair, long and warm, then whispered into her ear, his voice low and rough, the voice Philadelphia feared, but to her was only the voice of a man loving her with everything he had. Even knowing he didn't deserve it. Compassion didn't make you weak, Celeste, it made you unforgettable. She turned in his arms, looked up, and kissed him in the dawn light, on the balcony, surrounded by the scent of roses rising from Gianna's garden, by the first birds of morning, by a city coming awake, and that kiss, unlike the first, wasn't trembling or fearful or fragile. It was steady. It was calm. It was the kiss of 2 people who had crossed the darkness and found each other on the other side. Celeste Reyes's story began with 19 minutes and a choice: to save a stranger or protect her own future. She chose, and that choice took everything she had before giving her everything she needed. That is the lesson this story wants to share with everyone, that compassion is never weakness, that sometimes you have to lose everything to find what truly matters, that good people don't always win immediately, but they always win in the end, because the world has a way of rebalancing itself, and kindness, no matter how tested, will always find its way back, and that your hands, no matter how thin, how rough, how trembling, can save a life, can change a destiny, can rewrite an entire story. So if you are standing before a difficult choice, if you are hesitating between protecting yourself and helping someone else, remember Celeste. Remember that 19 minutes can change everything, and choose what is right, because life will never abandon those who dare to live with their hearts. That is the end of today's story. Thank you for listening from beginning to end. How did this story make you feel? Was there a moment that made you think of your own life? Of times you had to choose between personal gain and doing the right thing? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one and truly want to hear the stories and reflections from the depths of your hearts, because every comment you leave is the motivation for us to keep bringing meaningful stories to you each day. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with the people you love, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next videos. We wish all of you watching good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace and love. Goodbye, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.